Hello, welcome to Bold TV. I'm Sam Bloomquist, and let's talk about how professional sports are navigating the pandemic. The number one thing we've learned is bubbles work. The NBA, the WNBA, and the NHL all chose to isolate their players, and they have had no outbreaks thus far, knock on wood. Basketball has been a shining example of how a league should operate during a public health crisis. The NBA and the WNBA immediately started testing their players early and often in their bubbles in two different locations in Florida, Orlando and Bradenton. The basketball leagues had to find a fair way to finish their seasons, so they did a seeding games and a play-in tournament. Those came with some setbacks with contract negotiations, walkouts, and players opting out of the season, but games have been very competitive and fun to watch. The NBA led the charge with involving fans too. They chose virtual fans, where you can enter a room online to be chosen randomly to appear on a massive screen surrounding the court. On top of that, they pump in crowd noise to give users at home a normal-sounding experience. Next, let's talk baseball. The MLB decided against having a bubble, and they've had several outbreaks. But building a baseball bubble wasn't an option because teams are larger. Logistically, it would have been a nightmare, as you needed 3 or 4 bubbles to accommodate everybody. Add the reality of home ballparks give a huge home field advantage. Bubbles were seemingly always out of the question. The owners and the teams got hung up in schedule negotiations, and we only get a 60-game season as opposed to the normal 162. This season will no doubt be a sprint, but they were able to settle on extended playoffs. Next, hockey had the easiest time dealing with the shutdown. The NHL decided to move all teams to Canada and create 2 separate bubbles in Toronto and Edmonton. This allowed them to stagger games so they could have continuous coverage for their fans going all day long. Like basketball, the 2 hockey bubbles have not had any sort of outbreak. They chose a March Madness-style tournament instead of playoffs, which has been full of upsets and even a 5-overtime game. And hockey players are paid their full salaries before playoffs, so they didn't need to worry about contract negotiations at all. Lastly, let's talk about the million-dollar question. What should the NFL do? Football season is fast approaching, but a bubble isn't realistic for the sport because NFL teams are double the size of baseball and basketball teams. The NFL has had several challenges on its hand on top of that. If there is any sort of outbreak, it'll be very difficult to reschedule games because you can't do a doubleheader like you do with baseball, and there are few breaks to fit in extra games during the season. And on top of all that, some teams like the Miami Dolphins and the Kansas City Chiefs claim they will be having fans at games. Still, a majority of teams will not allow anyone in their stadium. So you have to ask the question, will that be fair and should that even be allowed? Well, that's all for today. Check out Bold TV on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.